right, now it's official. Welcome, everyone. We have a really special guest here this evening. I know for many people, St. Patrick's Day is today, so happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone. And many people are on spring break. And whether you're watching our event live this evening or later on YouTube, we just want to remind everyone that Sarasota University is an online university offering programs at the bachelor's, master's, and doctoral levels. Our programs are 100% online, and we offer degrees in Montessori education and Montessori leadership. Again, thank you for being here tonight. And we have the special guest this evening, Spramani Elaun. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah.
Spramani?
Yes.
Spramani Elaun is an art educator, author of The Way Children Make Art, The Science Art Method, and founder of Nature Art and the Art Teaching Blueprint Certification Program. She works with Montessori educators worldwide to integrate visual art literacy into the classroom in ways that honor child development, independence, and Montessori principles. Her science art method provides a research informed, process based approach that positions visual arts as a distinct and purposeful domain of learning. And Spramani, I'm so excited to meet you and to hear your amazing presentation tonight. So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for inviting me here, Sarasota University. I really appreciate that, and I have much gratitude for that. So I'm excited to be here and share some of my ideas and hear from the audience and see who is going to be here. So I guess that means I'm completely taken over. So hi, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow and get that prepared. All right, let me know if you guys see that. I'm going to open up my chat so I can kind of keep track of.
Yes, it looks great, Spramani.
Okay, great. And first of all, I definitely be involved as far as like chatting and asking questions. I'm going to ask a lot of questions to everybody. We'll get to that in a minute, but I just wanted to let everyone know that the topic tonight is bringing visual arts literacy into the Montessori classroom. I'll be sharing some ideas and discussing some of these things with you and hopefully getting some feedback from you. So let me formally introduce myself. You already introduced me, but just so you have an idea where I'm at, I'm in San Diego, California. I'm a professional artist, mom, homeschooled both my children, and the founder of Nature of Art, which is an art supply company. I attend some of the largest AMS conferences. You may have seen me before. I think a lot of people are there now. I am also the author of The Way Children Make Art and 11 other art education books that I've written throughout the years. And can't think of anything else I'm missing here. So if you want to know anything else about me, go ahead and jump in the chat and ask me in case I forgot anything. So I want to start off with a couple questions. Actually, I have a lot of questions for everybody. I'm going to be giving you some ideas about art literacy, but I'm also curious and wanting to understand everyone that's on the call. And I'd love for you to be engaged and kind of jump in the chat and answer some of these questions. So my first question is, type one word you associate with art in the classroom. Already. Joy. Love it. Wonder. Give everyone a few seconds. I can't see how many people are on, so I'll just give everybody a few seconds. Creativity. All right, we got two creativity. Okay, I have another question for you. What message did you receive about art growing up? Lindsay, I muted your keyboard if you don't mind. All right. Oh, it's messy. It takes practice. I don't draw. Yep, that I hear almost every single adult that I actually work with. That's pretty much what everyone says. It took talent. And I definitely want you to know that visual arts making does not take talent. It is actually a practice, and almost anyone can be an artist. Just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah. All right. All right. I got one more question for you. I think one more or two more. How many of you feel confident teaching art? I'm curious. Not me. Okay. Not at all. Okay. A little for young ones. All right. All right. And I think one more question. Sorry, I did have one more. Type yes if you have ever felt unprepared to guide art. Just trying to get in the feel of who's here. And also, I didn't see who is what ages or what grade levels you're teaching. If you are in early childhood, love to know, or if you're in elementary, lower or upper elementary, love to know, what type of art you're already teaching or in the classroom teaching. Sometimes I get totally lost in my own art in the process. Wonderful. Yes. Okay, good. So I've got some people that feel a little confident. All right. And oh, and some people don't feel underprepared. Okay. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about, why this conversation matters. So a lot of people don't realize, how important visual arts is, and I just kind of want to cover a couple of them first. So visual arts is often underdefined, and in most early childhood environments, including Montessori, art lacks intentional developmental structure. So a lot of teachers and schools don't realize that you can actually teach sequence art lessons and have some curriculum structure around it. The 0 to 12 window is the perfect time to start teaching art movements. These are the perfect ages. I actually start teaching children from 15 months all the way to 12 years. Now, I do teach teens and adults, but in the last, 20 years, I've focused all my work on early childhood and elementary grades. But I want you to know these ages are the right time to start teaching visual arts, and you can teach toddlers how to do art movements if you have the right, curriculum and the right um, information. And the visual arts misunderstanding is widespread. So I have traveled internationally, and I have worked with both AMS, AMI, all Montessori platforms, other pedagogies like Waldorf, Reggio, and I've worked with a lot of school districts and charter schools. And almost, I'm going to say about 90% of the time, I find out that most schools have no idea what art literacy covers. Art is frequently reduced to crafts, sometimes to seasonal projects or unstructured free choice, where a lot of teachers feel that if free choice is available, the kids will figure it out. Most educators are unaware of its literacy foundations. So I want you to know this is the perfect development window. There are a lot of things that are going on that actually apply to visual arts, like the sensitive periods. It's a peak, you guys know definitely that, these are the peak windows for sensorial absorption. Um, Sensorial work is perfect for this. This is the age when children are learning through the hand, through the senses, through repetition, and through fine motor control. Hand development is the perfect time for fine motor movement. You're already doing that in the classroom. Art making is the child's first language that precedes literacy. So yes, we teach our children to write and write and read, but art is actually a way that we can communicate. And the same elements that you're using to do the ABCs and the alphabet and numbers actually are the same elements that children can use to learn how to draw and paint. The other great thing about visual arts is it helps with emotional regulation. Art making provides a nonverbal channel for processing complex inner experiences. So the most common misunderstandings I notice when I work with schools and teachers is that a lot of schools have crafts, but not art literacy standards. So a lot of people think that if they have seasonal crafts going on, that they're actually teaching art literacy, but it does not equal art literacy. There's an idea that a free art shelf, is a way for children to be expressive, but sometimes, teachers might think that that replaces skill sequences and progression. And I want to tell you a little bit about how that helps with progression later on in our talk. Another thing is product based projects, meaning when a child makes something that you introduce and have them follow, which creates a product, is considered the artistic process. And if you don't know what the artistic process is, I'm going to share what that is. It is a process that we take children through, which meets the art standards, the national art standards. So a lot of these things are misunderstandings, and sometimes I have to, help out to clear these ideas up that art literacy has, it has standards, it has sequencing, it has progression, and it actually has a process that we can check as educators to make sure that children are getting the experience that they need. Lindsay, I see a couple people that were trying to get in, but I let them in. So I don't know if you don't see that on your end. All right, so I have another question. How many of you have seen a classroom where art became seasonal crafts? I'm just curious about that.
I've definitely seen that, Spramani.
Okay. I didn't know if you were waiting on me.
I think I have a little bit of a lag. Um, but
So,
yes, I think oftentimes art is the seasonal crafts become the art experience for the children.
yeah. All right. And then I have another question. If you guys want to answer this for me, how many of you have ever heard art called extra or non-essential or just busy work? Does any of that relate to any of you guys here? Which I hear all the time. A lot of teachers will tell me their frustration with students that are spending too much time in art making and on the shelves, and they feel like it's just busy work and it's not really important work. And when you look at your classroom, is art serving development or filling time? So I'm asking you these questions because I really want you to think about these things before I give you information and just kind of have you um, kind of think of these things out and make little notes about them. That way, if you do have questions, and at the end when we do Q&A, we can come back and I can help you answer and give you some ideas and tips.
Sprimani, oh, sorry. I
Go
guess
ahead.
I was just going to add that so often, in my experience, I've seen art really uh, ignite a child's interest in the academics if they feel connected through the arts.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So Montessori guys do not need to be artists. And I definitely want to let you know that if some of you were feeling like I don't teach arts or I feel like I'm not qualified to teach visual arts, I definitely want you to know you do not need to be an artist. I have taught thousands of children, parents and teachers that don't even know how to draw stick figures, how to teach art literacy. And yes, it's great if you know how to draw some stick figures, but you don't need to know how to draw realistic images. You don't need to know, you don't need to understand what, how to appreciate art or how, an art, how to break down lessons. These are the things that you can learn along with the children. And also you want to be teaching children to their level of their development. And I can tell you right now, my science art method that I mentioned at the beginning in the book that I've written will tell you that it's not about getting children to create something. It's more about us educators giving children the opportunity and the experience. And so I want you to know, you do not need to fine art training to support children's visual development well. You can do it, I promise you. Okay, another question for you. Would your classroom teachers feel relief hearing they do not need to be artists? I'm just curious. Great. Nice. Okay, good. And the next question is, how many of you wish you had more structure for bringing art in intentionally? Love to know. All right. Okay, I have one more question. I have one more question for you. Okay, how many of you wish you had more structure for bringing art intention? Oh, the same one I just read. All right, I must have had a double slide. All right, so I'm going to go into giving you guys a little background of what art literacy is. Okay, so visual art literacy is not about making pretty pictures. And I say this all the time because I really want to impress upon teachers and schools that it's not about what kids are going to produce or what they're going to make. It is completely about the process that your children are experiencing in their childhood, through the ages that you're teaching. It's a developmental language, the ability to see, interpret, and express our elements through mediums and materials and experience this thing called the artistic process. So I want to tell you a little bit about what art literacy really focuses around. And so visual arts has its own language, if you didn't know that. Um, so when you go to fine art school, I don't know if anyone here is a fine artist, but I went to fine art school. And one of the things that I was taught when I went to, fine art school in college was that there's this language that we learn and how to interpret artwork. And this thing that I'm talking about is called a long word. It's called the elements and principles of design. Now that's a long, big word and it's broad, but basically this is the language that artists speak. So I'll give you an example of what I mean when I say the language we speak. So how many of you here have ever been to the dentist or the doctors and they start talking doctor language that's above your knowledge and you start thinking in English, please? Or how many of you have ever been sitting down with a lawyer and a lawyer starts speaking this very complicated codes that is above your knowledge base? Well, every single, I guess, every single domain of business or education is has their own language. And so that's what I mean by art has its own language. When we go to art school, we learn this language. And the language I'm speaking is that big long word I said, the elements and principles of design. And I'm going to just give you a few elements just to ground you and understand. Like elements are things that artists study in their artworks, like color, or shapes, or textures, or forms, or lines. These are the things that we are teaching in language. And these are the things that art literacy should be foundational and start to work with and start to teach. We should start teaching our children. So let me give you an example. Learning to see as an artist is so important, but when we talk to children about art, we need to give them the vocabulary and the words that they need to actually interpret or to talk to you about their artwork. So if we teach them these elements in little lessons, we can help them communicate to us. They'll be able to have visual discrimination of the elements and have observation and even communicate with you about what they're observing in the art. How many times have you heard people say, we need to give our students art so they can appreciate art, but how do children explain what they're appreciating if they don't have the language and they don't have the foundation of the words that they need to use to express their appreciation for art? So that's the beginning of where I believe that we need to be teaching is we need to be giving children the language to speak of an artist. So that's the number one thing is, with art literacy, we want to teach them the elements and the things that they are seeing. You see this group of children here, they're doing crafts, and I see lots of elements right now on this table. I see color, I see shape, I see children putting elements into arrangement and in a pattern, and I see the space and I see texture. I see a lot of things going on. And so for me to interpret that, I know art language. And so we need to teach children what these elements are. So just to give you an example, this is an art camp that I was conducting, and we were crafting, we were cutting all kinds of crafts pieces apart, and we were designing um, some kind of arrangement. I think it was around, we were at a Day of the Dead um, activity, and these children were creating Day of the Dead color arrangements on this plate, and I was teaching them elements. So I just want you to recognize that when we're talking with children, we're looking at these things, sometimes we might think this is a craft, but how do you explain to children how to design and how to create? We have to teach them the elements. That way they're understanding in every level. Um, Another thing with learning art literacy is learning to express, making personal marks. This is a toddler right here that's learning to use these paint sticks. And this child is making marks and picking and choosing colors. Well, these are elements that I just spoke of. And the marks that he's making are lines. So already this child is being exposed to color and lines, and that's about it right now, just color and lines, and tools and different materials. So this is part of that art literacy. This is a child drawing. Now this child is drawing a self-portrait of themselves. There's an actual mirror. This is one of the lessons that I've taught in the past, where I have a mirror propped up and the children look at their face and try to create the shapes and lines. But if I were talking to the student and I was talking to their about their artwork, I would be describing things like curved lines and color and texture and shapes. We had to talk about the eye shape as a football, and how eyebrows, they could create lines, and how the lips came together. So these are the little building blocks that artists learn when they're creating artwork, and it's got its own language. Um, Learning through materials is also part of art literacy. So we have this toddler right here working with a paint roller and paint and paper and movement, and it's a sensorial experience. And this child is probably working with gross motor, but these are also the most important parts of teaching art literacy. So if you're a teacher and you're trying to decide like what activity I'm going to teach, there's one part you can focus on is introducing materials to children and letting them experience them. That is part of art literacy. Not only are we talking about the elements of purple and orange, but we're also letting them use movements and using tools. It's part of art literacy. Um, if you're looking at this picture here, this is a classroom, a Montessori classroom. I was teaching clay modeling, and I was introducing how to use our hands as a tool, and how to use wood carving tools, and how to use different clay tools. And so that is part of art literacy, is giving children the experience to experiment with artist tools. So I have another question for you. What is one challenge your classroom has with art, such as time, materials, confidence, or structure? Love for you to share, because I'm curious. I'd like to know. And I'll give you guys a few seconds to respond so I can kind of see where we're at. And I'm finally seeing Monica's comment earlier about I need my urban dictionary with my teen. Oh my God, I had two teenagers. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. My kids, I would repeat my kids' sayings and they would say, you know what I mean? I'm like, I don't know what you mean. Um, Number of students and ensuring everyone gets a turn. Yeah, that is a struggle. And there are ways around that, understanding, some teaching um, foundations that can support that. sometimes teachers are worried about the children will make a mess and get dirty. Yeah, there's a lot of that. That is like the number one struggle when I meet a Montessori teacher is the mess, because I truly believe that the Montessori classroom is beautiful and it's set up, with carpets and its environment is gorgeous, but I don't think half the time it's structured for children to actually experiment and explore and paint and do those things in the classroom. But I have created systems for that. I have lots of ideas and tips on that, which I'll share my books and resources. But that is the number one thing, is teachers always concerned about the mess. Um, I've had parents upset that kids have ruined their clothes. Yep. The way to fix that is to, there's a couple ways I fix that. And since you're saying it now, I think I'll just answer the question here. I teach Montessori teachers how to shrink down activities like the brushes and the paints, and not to use paints that stain, and also to have a rhythm of wearing a smock or choosing the days that children are going to do art, facilitating other toddler made versus adult made. Yep, that's a huge one. And the way we define that, which I'm jumping ahead of my slides, is we have children do more process based and stop sending home crafts that have an end product. So parents are not expecting that. All right. So another thing when you're teaching art literacy is, teaching them how to create symbolic shapes and lines, which goes right back to the elements. Children are identifying these things in all their other topics and domains of education that you're teaching them. But as an artist, that's exactly what the art facilitator is focused on, is teaching children how to make shapes and textures and lines and turning those into symbols and things that they're studying. That's all part of understanding art literacy. If you look at this picture here, well, actually, let me go back to that picture. This child is a toddler learning how to use a paint stick and learning how to make lines and making closed shapes. And if we look at this child is learning how to make elements with a paintbrush and paints. And these are the processes of an art lesson in teaching children how to develop that. These are what your lessons, I'm jumping ahead, but I definitely want to tell you that these are the things that we should be experimenting in the lessons, rather than holding back on product versus, process-based experimental lessons. When students come in my classroom, I generally don't even say we're going to make something. We're doing a lot of let's try this, let's practice this, let's get our movements down. That's a lot of the lessons that I'm teaching. And then what I end up doing is, over a process, we tie them together and the child's able to make something that's recognizable. All right, let me read this. So art literacy means providing students with an opportunity to work through the artistic process through their education using visual art standards. So I did mention earlier that I was going to explain to you what the artistic process is. So in visual arts and in nationally in the US, we have art standards that we can teach to. And one of the things to meet the art standards is to take children through this thing called the artistic process. And the artistic process is how educational models and universities were able to understand if children are actually having an artist experience. And the four actions, it's called the artistic process, and the artistic process has four actions. I do have this written out in some of my books and my educational videos, but I'll give them to you right now. There's four actions that children should be experiencing when they're doing art, and that is, one, they should be investigating. And I like to use the word investigating when understanding mediums, learning materials, investigating the things that they're looking at and using. Two is using their imagination, having an opportunity to think about in their mind of something they want to create and actually creating it. Um, and three is constructing. The artistic process means that children should be actually hand making something, constructing with their hands. And the final one for the artistic process is reflection. And reflection is giving children the opportunity to think or communicate about their artworks after they're done. And that's why it's important to teach children art literacy language so they can actually do that, whether that's talking to you or sharing their art with their parents or pointing out elements in their art, or even, going home and talking to their parents. So it's very important that we think about this thing called the artistic process. It is really the focal point to putting together an art literacy program. So I have another question for you, just kind of see if you guys are still with me. Are you guys still with me? Um, so what kind of concentration do you see here in this picture? And love to see if you guys can notice that. And just after I just told you about the four artistic movements and the processes that children should go through, I'm curious if you can identify any of them. I see the facilitating toddler versus adult made. Yeah, that is definitely something that is important for you to identify and understand. Okay, yes, this is so interesting. Anyone else want to take a shot at what kind of concentration do you see here?
It looks as though the one student is focused on the tactile aspect of the materials they're interacting with.
Yeah, and maybe the other one is learning from the other one or waiting to see what she's going to do.
Yeah, or maybe even collaborating, like they're
Yeah,
having a conversation about what's coming next or what they're thinking about.
yeah, or maybe she gave her an idea. Why don't you try this? Okay, let me see if it
Yeah,
works for me. This is definitely what I would call understanding what that the process is far more important than whatever it is they're creating and making. And by the way, what they were making, we were making sea life creatures with clay, but the process was so much more important to me. And I was teaching them, about the medium and giving them an opportunity to investigate the materials and how they feel and how they work and whether or not they can make some forms out of them, and just different ideas, and collaborating and using the language that I had just taught them. All right, new question. See if I can get you guys to answer me these. How many of you feel confident in teaching art? Oh, I already asked this question. I'm sorry. Let me skip this one. All right. I have more questions. Don't worry. They're coming. So the arts are tools for multicultural understanding. And I want to talk a little bit about this and kind of share some ideas about how this is part of art literacy, is giving children an opportunity to use, culture to understand culture through the visual arts. Ah, there's my question. Okay. What cultural art forms do your children already encounter in the classroom, homes, or communities? Wanted to find out if you guys are already doing this in your classroom. And if you're watching the recording, it would be great if you got a pen and paper and you really did spend some time, writing these answers out for you. So when you are going back to start thinking about bringing art in the classroom, you really have, a knowledge of where some of these art lessons could come from. And I know actually a lot of teachers come to me and say, I don't know what to teach. I don't know where to integrate it to. And, just thinking about these things here would give you some kind of direction on where to, start with lessons there. Did you have some, did you want to share with us? Oops,
I just
sorry.
think that is such a beautiful question, Spramani, to really extend art and identify the cultural connections, so that every child feels seen and valued for um, the heritage that they bring with them in their family too. I think this is especially important in our current time that we're living in, that we can really help every child feel special and seen and heard for their unique um, backgrounds, and feel honored and special for that. We don't have to erase people's heritage to embrace them.
Yeah, this is pretty exciting because there's so much that can be, um, brought into the classroom through every single, student's cultural and share. I love what Ruth said, mosaics with what they collected on a nature walk. Lovely. So I'm going to give you some background on why I think that we should be connecting and how I have connected visual arts. Sorry, I have my photo slide in my way here. The chat box is in my way here. Okay, so if we look at the top left corner here, I have human communication. I want you you guys know this already, but I really want you to think about this, that, you know, art is very old, and we have, as humans, been communicating visually already. Just by when we look at the oldest artwork that have been discovered in caves and walls, what I'm seeing here is our elements. I see color and I see shape and I see lines and I see texture. And so already humans were already speaking to each other using art. So human communication has gone back for thousands and thousands of years in several continents and all kinds of different nationalities. If we look here on the top right, I have this term called multicultural understanding. Now I want to share this. So I have three pictures here. On this side here, where I don't know if you guys can see my mouse. On this side here, I have a Sumi painting. It's a Chinese calligraphy painting. In the middle, I have a Turkish um, carpet. And then on this far side, I have a picture of a woman dancing with costumes. So I travel a lot and teach visual arts, and I also go to train schools. And one of the things I've done, so when I actually went to China and I taught many schools, but when I landed in China, I went walking around to a lot of museums and I got to really understand that country. Before I went to go teach the teachers, I really dove into their culture and I wanted to use their culture to explain visual arts to them. So I was able to understand that Sumi painting and calligraphy were the beginning foundation of visual arts in China. And I learned about the different types of materials and the inks and the Sumi ink and the paintbrushes. And I was able to take that lesson into the classroom and ask the teachers, are you teaching your students your own country's artwork and the history behind it? And they were really surprised, like, actually, no. They hadn't thought about using their own culture to teach their children the basic elements of art. In the middle here, I went to Turkey and I had an opportunity to visit several mosques and walk, through all the outdoor sales bazaars. And one of the things I noticed about Turkey and all the things that I saw was a lot of texture and patterns and shapes and symbolic and weaving, so much tapestry, so much weaving. Now, weaving is considered an art. It's in the craft domain, and it has to do with fabric. It has to do with color. It has to do with design. That whole country had so many beautiful tapestries that I could talk about symbols and shapes and lines and things like that. And the teachers were also surprised. And I thought, you could bring these things into your classroom, even your 3 to 6, and start talking about, weaving and tie that into a weaving lesson. And now on this far picture here, I went to Indonesia, and one of the beautiful things I learned when I was in Indonesia was that the most important thing to the Indonesian culture was talking about the story of how their ancestors became, and they have this beautiful cultural dance that they perform all over the country year round, and it's very important to the story. And I watched this performing arts right in front of me with these beautiful costumes and these beautiful makeup. And so for me, I was able to learn about this country. And for you as a teacher, you're able to do that and tap into that too as well. Like you said, Lindsay, you said, it's a wonderful opportunity for every student to bring something about their culture and where they were born or where their ancestors were born, and maybe learn a little bit about their background. So this is a really important reason why, you know, talking cultural arts is very important. Now, if you move down here to my lower left here, I have understand social, historical, and cultural contexts. And that's very important for us to look at the symbols and the lines and to understand each society's beliefs. You know, if you guys look here, you get here. And one of the things I like to ask my teachers that are in my training is, what do you see here? What does it mean to you? You know, if you type it in, see anything that um, means anything to you. And the reason why these things mean something to us because every culture has a meaning behind a symbol or a line or a color. And those are things that we can teach our children. And even in the upper elementary, children love learning these things and connecting these things. But it does qualify as visual arts. And I think that's one of the things I definitely want you to, recognize. Oh, yeah, thank you. So yeah, scared holidays. Yes, absolutely. Now, if we look at this last picture here on the bottom right, I have a way to understand their own countries again. And this is Mexican pottery, and that was another way when I went to Mexico to teach that I was able to explain to, teachers that, pattern and design and layout is so important. Even painting, pottery and the colors and the and understanding the culture's choices on the designs they use. Here we have in, Australian indigenous painting, the Aboriginals, using the dots and the lines. I'm not going to get too deep into cultural studies, but there's a lot of topics I talk about appropriation and and respecting another culture. This isn't really the time for me to go into that, but that's a whole topic and a different way of teaching. Yeah, this is another way I wanted to show you that art supports cultural awareness. All right, so now I hope you have a little understanding of, bringing visual arts into the classroom and what that actually could look like. It could look like teaching, language, words, teaching elements, symbols, teaching culture, maybe, experiencing and exploring mediums and materials and tools. So now this is a shelf stage that I set up for one of the lessons I teach. And I like to use this book about Matisse, and I like to do tissue and collage, and I like to stage it and put the materials. But now when you look at this, you can now understand like, oh, okay, we're not just doing a finished product here, it's a really cute project where I asked children to focus on organic shapes and geometric shapes, or how to build like a cityscape. But really, I'm teaching not just this finished product. That is not what my focus is. My focus is introducing language of, like I said, geometric shapes and organic shapes. The materials, scissors and glue, giving them an opportunity to experiment, giving them opportunity to change and arrange patterns and textures. So art literacy does have foundations, and I think that's, what I wanted to drive is there are standards that you can focus on to teach. So I'm going to give you some tips because we are wrapping up and we're going to get to Q&A and we're done. So let me just give you a few more tips really quick. Hopefully I don't have any questions in it. So I can't remember if I put questions, but you know, takeaways I want you to take is you see these two young children here painting, and they're experiencing process-based art. They're experiencing painting. The language that I would be using with the child is green paint, brush strokes, purple paint, yellow paint, lines and textures and movement. These are words that I would be using and teaching the children. Um, there are so many books, storybooks you can use. I have a training on my website called How to Use Storybooks in Visual Arts. And you can start with just storybooks. Every book has the elements that I've been discussing with you because no painting and no drawing hasn't cannot be described without an element, just so you know. And you can open up storybooks and learn and use these language without even bringing out paint. So some of you who were worried about math, you can actually start teaching this language just by looking at storybooks. Just wanted to give you that tip. Another thing is the classroom environment shapes the result. And so this is a cute little setup. I like to set up teaching primary colors, but poor materials, rush setup, and product-driven expectations shut children down. Better materials and calmer presentations invite deeper engagement. So, having things available for children to experiment and not focus on the end product, just really having an opportunity to look at the things closer. So just to give you guys a visual, this is just a primary setup. I have some examples and ideas. I have some trays that children can experiment with: primary paint sticks, primary paint, primary dot stampers. This is a material that I make primary color mixing and watercolor paper. I did have one more question in here. When you look at your classroom, is art serving development or filling time? I just want you also to reflect on that for yourself. I'd love for you to share, but I also want you to leave thinking about this. Process-based art supports the whole child. If you don't know about process-based, I do have a lot of education behind this. I have some books available and some training. Again, at the end, I'll share and show you, direct you where you can find that out. But art supports concentration, confidence, expression, independence, and connection to culture and classroom learning. So it is far more important for you to support the process than what happens at the end. And that's one of the things I'm always saying. I want to drive before you jump off. Another question for you: what happens when the adult's outcome matters more than the child's process? That's a tough question. But you guys are Montessori teachers, and I know you know the answers to this. But go ahead and write it down for you to think about this. If you want to share with your classroom or your teachers or your administrator, it is something to focus on and think about it. Yeah. Another thing I want a tip is, upgrade one material instead of everything at once. Now, we didn't talk about setup and materials. We didn't have enough time, but I would suggest something. Try one new thing. Try new paintbrushes. Try new paper. Try new colored pencils, and focus on one thing at a time. Yeah, you're right about that, Lindsay. The child is no longer the center of the attention. Wow, good answer. Love it. And so the final thing I'm going to kind of wrap up here is, when schools struggle with art, one of the things I definitely know for fact is the gap isn't the lack of passion. It's just a lack of framework. The lack of clarity. Art is often offered without a defined development purpose. Teachers feel uncertain about what they're trying to achieve. A lot of times teachers put together lessons they actually hadn't thought about what is being achieved throughout the school year, by focusing on that art lesson. No defined progression. Materials and activities are rotated based on seasons and themes, not the child's development readiness. When outcomes are predetermined, children are executing the teacher's vision, not building their own literacy. And that goes back to what we just said. It's so important for you to know. Teacher insecurity. Most early child educators have never been trained on visual arts. And so the confidence comes from clear systems, not talent. All right, so we are at Q&A. Let me, before I don't know if you want me to share up, so I have all these slides here to share. I just skipped too fast, sorry. Did you want to do Q&A first, Lindsay, before we jumped into my resources?
No, go right ahead. I think it goes along perfectly.
Yeah.
And that was a question I had too. Is there's so much information here, Spramani, and I'm eager to know where I can go to find more information.
Yeah, so this is just really an introductory to me and how art can be, structured. And I have spent the last 15 years working specifically with Montessori educators worldwide, bringing systems and processes, which I think I've done a good job on. So let me share some resources for you. And right now is a good time for you to drop in your questions for me while I'm sharing these, and then hopefully I can get to them. So first of all, I have two guides that I developed for Montessori educators. I have an early childhood guide and I have an elementary guide, and these are available paperback and digital. I also have, I think I mentioned all the other books that I've written. I have other topics. I do recommend, if you're going to start anywhere, I recommend you start with my guides, because my guides go into art literacy a little deeper and just give you some, a little roadmap and show you, what areas you could be covering. So you can get a hold of my books. Um, that's the starting point. And then when you decide what area, I do have curriculums. I have full sequential step-by-step curriculums for the schools that are ready to go. They're both for early childhood and elementary and lower elementary. I have people that actually use these for middle school and high school. So you can find a system of lessons if you want to dive into those areas. I teach in a system, and you'll kind of see when you read my guides what I recommend. I do have an art certification for those of you who want that have a school and you want to choose one teacher to learn the system and teach, structured art lessons or develop art programming. I have this program called the Art Teaching Blueprint. It's online and it's coaching with me, so you have access to me. Occasionally, I do cohort material training, which I do, and I recommend for you to know about this to jump on my newsletter. You can follow this QR code, but you can go to also my website, which I failed to put here. I'll put in the chat, Montessori art.com is my website, and you can find everything there. You can even sign up for my newsletter. But most of you might see me at conferences. Again, I usually do AMS. This year I am going to be in Europe for the Congressional Montessori Conference in Latvia in the Baltic Sea. So I'll be there next week. If any of you are there, I found out Lindsay's going to be there. That's wonderful. I'm excited. But I have books, I have art supplies, I have curriculum, I have all the things to help you get art literacy, to bring it in. So I'd love to answer questions for you. If I'm going to go ahead and take my stop share. There we go. All right, my friends, jump on in. If you want to take your microphone off or your camera. Yeah. I know I rushed through everything. I always have too much to share. And so this time I told myself, don't put too much so you don't go over time. So I deleted like literally 40 slides.
It was perfect. We're right almost at the hour, and I would love to hear from the audience if you have any questions. You are able to unmute yourself. So if you have a question, go ahead and come off, and we'd love to hear from you. Or put your question in the chat if you're somewhere where you can't talk, but you'd like to ask the question. We can answer your
And
question from the chat as well.
And you don't have to answer the question. Maybe you just want to share how art goes in your classroom. Love to hear and learn from you. Everybody approaches visual arts differently.
I think the visual arts can be so powerful for children of all ages and adults as well.
Yes. I teach a lot of adults. They've
Oh,
never painted and drawn.
that's so wonderful.
When I'm doing in service, you can actually bring me to your school. I travel worldwide and can do a whole staff. And the smiles I see on the teachers, but after the 2 days spent with me painting and drawing, they're like, I didn't know I could do this. I'm like, you can do it.
That's wonderful. Well, and it's finding that joy and that you know, having fun with it, not too much pressure.
Oh,
Ruth Ann, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, I forgot to put
Yes,
the,
I'm just trying to figure out how to unmute. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Um, one of the challenges I have, I work at the International Montessori Schools at Westchester, Pennsylvania, and we do have a training program for Montessori teachers. And one of the challenges I continually have in the classroom is people seem to be afraid of mess. And when you talk about the process, I include like the setup and the cleanup as a joyful process. But I feel like some of the teachers and trainers and assistants don't find that. So I'm wondering, do you have tools for helping us see the mess as part of the good process and see the cleanup as a joyful thing?
Yeah, I tend to find out that the training they got was maybe verbal directions and instructions rather than letting them paint with you. Meaning, when I train, I actually make the teachers paint with me and go through the process for them to actually experience that joy. I really believe that you need to have a PD day where the teachers are actually setting up and painting themselves as artists for them to see the process and to go through it to understand what the children are missing out on. That is usually because I have a lot of ways to minimize mess. But what I did notice is I'll show up to a school to do professional development, and right away we start jumping into doing art. By the end of the 2 days, they realize, oh, okay, I can teach a cleanup. I can allow this to happen. And that comes from teaching children, teaching teachers that there needs to be a segmented time. There needs to be segmented demonstrations. There needs to be the proper materials. There needs to be the proper demonstrations on how cleanup looks like. The teacher needs to actually learn to do it hands-on by themselves. I think that you would have more success if you actually did a painting session with them and honestly see their joy by doing it and having fun. I'll take rocks and paint to, and when I meet teachers, I'll say, we're gonna rock paint. And right there, they're like, oh my God, that's so messy. And then I show them the system of have a napkin, have a wash jar, have little paintbrushes, have children sit, find the designated area for painting. I hope that helps.
Yes, excellent, excellent.
And you can bring me to your school if you want. But I do have for schools that can't bring me, I do have cohorts of painting cohorts. I have drawing cohorts and crafting cohorts and clay modeling cohorts. I have those available. So I would recommend you keep an eye on that and join my art newsletter. If you didn't get that, if you can find that, if you go to my website and you go into the menu, you'll see art newsletter. Type that in, get in there, and you're going to get a weekly tip, or I share every week for all ages. I give free advice every week, year round.
And Spramani, again, the email is Montessori art, or sorry, the website, is it
Hyphen
Montessori? I
hyphen
see it in the
art.com.
chat.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
I don't know.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, I think I'm going to be signing up for your newsletter as well. It's just been so inspirational to hear you speak tonight and has reignited my interest and commitment to making sure that art is part of my own grandson's life. That's something that I am supporting as well. It's just so important. And Spramani, there's a question from Natalie in the chat. The 4 aspects of art that you mentioned. She says that
Okay.
she thinks the last one was reflection.
Yeah. So it's called the artistic process, and the artistic process has 4 actions, and they're called investigate, imagine, construct, and reflect. And if you do get my art guide, I do break it down and explain what they mean. Well, I hope that, I gave you guys a little bit of knowledge, and it was something that you learned from and got some
Well,
ideas.
I've
But
learned
again,
so much tonight. And I feel inspired to learn even more. So thank you. And I look forward to meeting you in person in Latvia, of all places,
I
Spramani.
know. We'll see you next week then.
So, yes, safe travels, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
And again, thanks to everyone here tonight for participating. And Spramani, thank you again for the gift of your time and talent and wisdom, and for making the world a better place. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone. See you next month.